Hello, welcome to our podcast. Today we're talking about museum education. My name is Ruth Rugg. I'm with the Texas Association of Museums, and I have been traveling with my colleagues from the Texas Historical Commission to communities throughout the state to present workshops about museum education. This program is called Training for Texas Museums, and it is supported by a generous grant from IMLS, the Institute for Museum and Library Services. The grant allows us to recruit from the finest expertise across the nation, and for this particular workshop on museum education, we have been able to bring to Texas Claudia Ocello. She's from Morristown, New Jersey, is president and CEO of a company called Museum Partners Consulting. She is a terrific instructor and an expert in museum education and interpretation. And Claudia, we're glad to have you.
Thank you.
So it's very difficult to condense everything we've learned in the workshops into a very small time for the podcast. But I wonder if you might just hit some of the high points. What are maybe the top 5 things we need to know about museum education?
Well, the first thing I think that's really important is to know your audience. And you can do that in a variety of ways. You can observe who's in your museum and maybe get some data about them. Try and find out maybe their age, their reason for visiting, where they're coming from. And that information, once you look at it, you can also see who's not coming to your museum and think about some ways to attract that visitor.
That sounds like really smart, practical things. You know, I came to my museum career through PR and marketing, and we talked a lot about audience, but really audience is important to other work areas, especially education.
Definitely.
Because how can you produce a program if you don't know who it's for?
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
That's exactly right.
Well, what else do you need to know?
Well, I think another thing you want to think about now that you know who your audience is the type of program that you're doing may not always be suitable for each different type of audience that you're getting. So you probably need to focus your program and maybe offer a few different types of tours. The tours could be, you know, something that's really less comprehensive, maybe highlighting just a few of the really great objects, and then you leave your audience wanting more. So it means that you may have to rethink the way that you're approaching your tours. You didn't learn all the stuff about your museum in 1 hour or 1 day or 1 week. So it's hard for us to expect our visitors to do the same thing. So giving an encyclopedic tour of a whole museum or whole exhibit probably isn't the best way to go for your audience.
Well, that sounds like common sense to think about different audiences and different kinds of tours. But a museum education staff could use the same docents for teaching either way, right?
Absolutely. They just need to be trained in a different way.
Because it's the same story.
That's right.
And the story is really important. Well, what else would you say is in your top 5?
I think also evaluation tends to fall by the wayside. So having a plan for evaluation and thinking about what it is that you want to evaluate is really important, because you would use a different evaluation tool depending on what you wanted to evaluate. Did you change somebody's attitude about something, the way that they're thinking, their perspective, or did you give them some new knowledge? To measure those, you would need 2 completely different types of evaluation tools.
And is it usually the museum educators who do that evaluation?
A lot of times it falls into their venue, and it's good for them to be thinking about it.
Sort of working backwards.
That's right.
That sounds good. Well, what else?
Well, you know, once you've thought about your audience and your tour and your evaluation, you want to make sure that they have something fun to do in the galleries, and whatever your exhibit is or whatever your historic house is, make what you do with them meaningful so that they'll get something out of it that they can relate back to themselves and that will make sense to them. Again, just telling the story is maybe not enough. Discovering it could be fun. Maybe you, again, change their idea, their perspective on something by having a discussion.
Do you remember a time when someone changed your idea about something in a museum?
Absolutely. It happens very often with both kids and adults.
Well, what else?
You know, all these things sound really great, but I think the scariest thing is that it's change, and change can be really difficult if you're used to doing something one way for a really long time. So taking a risk, I think, is the other big tip that I would suggest to people. You know, it's hard, but you never know until you try. And start small. Maybe you don't want to do a whole tour. That's different, but maybe just a part of it. You try out a new strategy and you see if that works, or a different way to collect data on your visitors, or maybe you've never observed your visitors and this will be the first time you're doing it. So little steps can really add up to a lot, and then maybe that'll spur you to make the overall change that will make your education programs top-notch.
Well, that makes sense to me. Use common sense and use your own experiences and know your audience.
Definitely.
And take that risk.
Yes.
Well, thank you. Thank you for joining us. I know you'll enjoy hearing more from Claudia.